good, I'm going to say past, future, and present, depending on how you view this form of media. And welcome to Richard and Karl Presents Deep Space and Dragons. I'm Richard.
And I'm Karl.
And to start today's episode off with a bit of a... I'm not going to say entrapment, but we've definitely got some fan questions about the Sandblaster Saga. So I'm going to ask for the Karlverse today. How goes the Sandblaster Saga? Have you successfully made your own tombstone with it yet?
Oh, no. I procrastinated a little bit this week. I was planning on making some genuine progress. I was hoping maybe even to have it done today. But then I realized that my garage is a complete disaster. Oh, well, it was. Now it's only half a disaster because, well, I cleaned up a bunch of stuff. One of my roommates works at a liquor store.
That tracks.
And so he brings home a lot. He brings home a lot of like liquor, which means that there's, cans and stuff all over in the garage because, that's the place to be. And so then I went to cut a board down to size so I could make the armholes on the side of my Sandblaster box, and I realized I had nowhere to work. So I had to clean the garage instead of actually making progress on the Sandblaster.
Okay, because after speaking with a couple fans at this show, people are kind of trying to place Karl on the genius crazy scale a bit. Because sometimes you'll very thoroughly explain your plans for the Sandblaster, how it will work, and it'll be a very sound, rational explanation. And other times, it's like maybe this episode should have a trigger warning in case you're triggered by TVs being stabbed. So the Karl chaos level is just kind of like a number I'm mentally tracking to try and see like how chaotic you come off in our episodes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm going to say this week, for a mini segment, which I'll probably forget about by our next recording, your current chaos level is probably a 7 out of 10. Not that chaotic, but still far more chaotic than the average person.
Fair enough. And what's new with you, Richard?
So, I'm not sure if you're familiar with NaNoWriMo or November Writing Month.
Okay.
But effectively, it's a website that you use to try and track whether you could write a novel within a month.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to hit 50,000 words, which is... It's kind of funny, actually, as novels have been... Basically, as people have been getting lazier, novels have been getting shorter, because people are less willing to read more text in one sitting. And I find that my last novel, clocking at 100,000 words, was almost too long, but if you go back to, like, Lord of the Rings, you'd barely describe a tree in that size of a book.
Well, I mean, that actually does bring up an interesting point. I watched a video about narration techniques for D&D specifically, and one of the things that he said is that older books, they have to describe their fantastical settings because people hadn't seen the Alps. Like, not that everybody's specifically been to these like wonderful natural spectacles, but at least through like TV or the internet, like people have seen so much more of the world, at least vicariously, that older books had to describe a lot of things, where newer books you can get away with describing a lot less, which means you can have the same amount of content in far fewer words.
It's kind of funny, because when we did our Dune episode, you brought this up as well, where the original Dune novel had to explain what's a force field, and we definitely dabbled on that topic a bit as well. But to loop back to go ahead.
Going back to the Dune thing, my understanding is that Dune is actually just incredibly dense because he had a glossary for those sorts of things and didn't bother explaining them in the text.
Fair enough. So on my current project, I'm up to about 40,000 words, because I'm using this as that little bit of motivation I need. So all I did yesterday was write. And after successfully spending far too much time... So, as I've mentioned before, I did a lot of research into tournament structures, so the fictional tournament that backs my new novel will actually make sense for the amount people are charged for admission, for the number of rounds that they battle, and the prize payouts to be an actual feasible event, as feasible as giant robot fighting can possibly be. So,
Right.
in my new chapter, I have one character start explaining this, another one be like, no one wants to hear your boring research, and then just had a character shun my own research in the contents of my book, and it made me laugh.
So this November book that you're writing, is that the short story you promised me about Eisen teaching a class?
Unfortunately, for that particular short story, I ended up going for a more murderous giant robots motif,
Okay.
because the words sometimes take me. And I send you a lot of my short stories and writing projects, but I try not to fill up your queue, so until I get a response back from the last one I sent you, you're kind of on hold.
Okay, I guess I better respond to that then.
So that was my entire what's new in my world is trying to write a novel during November while still giving virtual tours and working on various projects. Basically went full nerd and it's been delightful.
Okay, but I mean, like, so you wrote 40,000 words in 8 days?
Kind of. So in the last 8 days, I've probably wrote about 30,000 new words, and I've repurposed about 10,000 words. So, say for example,
Okay.
Say for example your hypothetical Eisen story I do a cool fight scene in. I never ended up using the Eisen story, so I took the cool fight scene, replaced the samurais with robots, added some metallic explosions, and then repurposed that fight scene for my project. So,
Yeah, okay.
a lot of nothing I ever write gets deleted. It gets thrown in my scraps bin. And sometimes I'll be writing a story, I'll be like, okay, I got the characters described, I got the location set. Do I have any fight scenes in my scraps folder I can repurpose for this?
Yeah, all right.
So,
Uh,
I have written a terrifying number of words, and they're almost readable, because as you're well aware, my first drafts are not quite designed to be read by human beings. They're in a special Richard-only language.
yeah, I understand about 80% of what's going on.
Perfect. So, to transition into today's topic of focus, since unfortunately your sandblaster neither succeeded nor exploded this week, which I was happy for either outcome for the record, because I'm a supportive friend.
Right.
So if your garage turns into a giant fireball, or if you successfully carve, I don't know, 1-inch grids into a coffee table, because that's probably what I'd use a sandblaster for.
No. If I can get the sandblaster done in time, you take, in my case, it's going to be a lighthouse, and you divide it into 4 color gradients: black, dark gray, light gray, and white. And so then you cover everything except for what you want for black, and you sandblast that. And then you cover everything except what you want for the dark gray and the black, and then you sandblast that, which will make the black slightly darker than the dark gray. And then you do that for the light gray, and then so the light gray will be the lightest, and the other 2 will be slightly darker because you're sandblasting those 2-3 times. And then the white is just going to be clear glass. And so, like, the light from the top of the lighthouse will be the clear glass, and everything else will have the gradient of shadows. And I'm going to make that for a Christmas gift for my mom, because she loves lighthouses.
Aw, that's adorable. You know, I think the topic for today's episode is actually just going to be on projects we've started, projects we've finished, and let's just call today's episode Unfinished and Finished Side Projects.
Oh, man, I would be a ghost for sure. I have so much unfinished business.
Right? Like, so my next thing I'm going to ask you about is your racing video game you attempted to code a couple years back. This is going to be the episode where we call each other out on projects we started but never finished or have finished.
Well, I mean, technically, I did create a single-player version of it that I gave to my dad, and I'm pretty sure I bothered to actually give it on to him on a floppy disk, which not actually a floppy disk. Anyway, old technology. Point of the matter is that the game was rather small, so I was able to fit it on an old removable media. and I gave it to my dad for Christmas. Although I don't think he ever actually played it, which makes me a little bit sad
Because
because I never got any feedback from him on that. But I mean, it needs lots of improvements and work. But that one's actually got a playable beta.
Because I will say,
Alpha?
after we discussed this project of your vector-based racing game, I did write up a rule sheet to try and make a playable version of it on Roll20. Because I liked your fundamental concept. And I'm like, this could be made into a board game or a card game. And for a while I had it set up that it's almost to the point where we could have theoretically play-tested it on Roll20's virtual tabletop. But never quite got around to hitting that point. Because your idea of memory serves was all about increasing and decreasing vectors. And when we did our playtest, though, we hit a problem where you didn't technically brake any faster than you accelerated, so you couldn't actually do a full U-turn around a curve.
Yeah, that is one of the many improvements that needs to be added to the game, which is acceleration versus braking speed. And then the various ways in which you could use that to change your target vector more quickly around a corner without actually having to pass through 0-0. As a speed, that is.
One of my ideas I had for this, if it were to ever be made into a physical game, was you'd put a racing reel in front of each player that has 4 quadrants on it, and you would just simply use little beads to track how fast you are on each of those quadrants on the wheel. But then have a brake function where you could just simply swipe the board clean, and that was your action for the turn. That was the idea of just slamming on the brakes.
I mean, yeah, I was thinking about doing something even perhaps a bit more customizable, where you have like cards with certain stats. So certain vehicles would be able to accelerate faster, but wouldn't be able to brake as fast, or be able to brake faster but have a lower top speed, or I don't know. Not sure exactly what sort of range variance that would be, or whether or not that would create some sort of perfect meta value that you're supposed to get to if you actually want to win the ideal race. But
well,
it'd
as
be pretty
you
fun.
Kind of pointed out last time you visited after I got stomped on Mario Kart in a vicious thrashing, is the secret to winning a racing game is literally just to plot the mathematical shortest route through the course. Which, when said out loud, sounds condescending, but there is some actual solid logic to that.
It's hard to give people advice without sounding condescending. For Mario Kart in particular, the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has the assisted steering function, and for all players besides player 1, by default, it is on. And, I genuinely, I think that Mario Kart 8 is a hard enough game that new players, or even intermediate players, can benefit from the assisted steering. But I always tell people, it's like, I'm not judging you. If you want it off, you have to turn it off. And then they all get like, oh, I can play without it. And then they try and play without it, and I just crush them because they could have actually benefited from it. But they felt like I was judging them when in fact I was just trying to give them advice about whether or not they want this thing on.
Amusingly, for Mario Kart, I think one of the biggest problem I see players make, myself included, is they give you so many customizable options that a beginner racer shouldn't even touch. Realistically, a default standard kart with standard wheels and a standard character makes far more sense than picking any choices. Because if you don't know what you're doing, every choice other than default is technically worse. Because you're just changing things at random for a game that you don't know the rules of. It would be like if you're playing Monopoly, and whenever you landed on a property, you rolled a dice and put down risk pieces. Like, you don't actually know what the rules are, but you're already changing them.
Well, I mean, like that's almost a problem that I have with designing board games and stuff in general, because I mean, like, Dokapon Kingdom was a really cool Wii game, and it was like a Mario Party.
I love that game so much.
Right. But being a Mario Party type game, you try and translate it to a physical board game. I've always thought that was a really cool project. And this is a project which I have never actually completed because write down the rules, try and figure out what they are, and then you start changing them before you even play tested them because you're like, no, that rule's stupid, or not. But I mean, realistically, I should just get the rules as default as possible because changing them before I even know what they are, that's just spelling out disaster. Which is probably part of the reason I've never truly completed the creating the board game version of a video game board game.
I mean, I've also dived into that. My version of Dokapon Kingdom was called Dragons and Taxes. And a lot of the mechanics translate very nicely to a board game. But Dokapon Kingdom builds mechanics on mechanics on mechanics. And my question wasn't not what rules to change, but what rules to keep to try and pare it down to being manageable. Some board games like Eldritch Horror, for example, are actually large enough in scope that they have like 20 different decks of cards, tokens, dice, players, skills, items, map tokens, doomsday timers, and the setup for that game is almost beyond me. Like, you almost have a dedicated friend who owns Eldritch Horror whose job it is to set up the game, and it's usually on par with the game itself, where if you don't make sure to put everything back into the pre-labeled baggies after a game session of Eldritch Horror, you're not going to be prepared. So if you're to make Dokapon Kingdom actually accurate to Dokapon Kingdom, the setup would be immeasurable, because the game has, other than its amusing rock paper scissors system, it has combat items, combat magic, equipment, leveling, growth, 6 continents, random battles, random monster encounters, random items, random events, rolling dice to decide the speed ties, picking cards for who goes first, accuracy, evasion, and like, there's so many systems that you really need to pick and choose which systems are vital to the experience if you want to make a physical version. And by the time you've done that, it's almost easier to buy a Nintendo Wii, pick up a copy of Dokapon Kingdom, invite your friends over and just play it. Which is a shame, because as a board game, you could actually make such a really good project out of the ideas. But I didn't even get to mentioning the property and taxes, because they straight up threw Monopoly in there as an extra feature. Because you might as well have Monopoly in your game, and a full story mode. Oh man. Other than just gushing about Dokapon Kingdom, just trying to make it simplistic enough to fit in a box would be the first task of making a board game version of it.
I definitely tried to make my version as complete of an experience as possible. And actually, one year for Christmas, I got my parents to get me a whiteboard so that I could cut it down to size. So it was a 20 by 20 piece of dry erase whiteboard. And then I actually plotted out a board to try and see like different space distribution, and then I was going to try and print off cards, but I don't really.
Yeah.
It was a monumental task, especially trying to do it by yourself.
Agreed. Like, I was looking into the idea of, instead of having a board itself, because all the squares do random things anyway, having cards that have the color tile on the back, and when you flip it are the square, and you would technically, like, you look at like a reference chart and just lay them out as your board. Was the idea I was thinking of. But, like I said, it just kind of kept multiplying in complexity. That's one thing I've learned as a writer, is I had a lot of projects that were, like, card game and board game design are passions of mine. But by the time I've written a compelling plot for my original project, I might as well just write a novel. Because I can vomit out like 5,000 words a day of text, but that's not the only component of trying to make a game. And by the time I've taken into the amount of effort it would take to make a functional board game, I might as well just write a story, because I've pretty much put that many words to paper anyway, without even getting to the how it would work part.
But moving on to a project that I personally have completed, which, I mean, again, it could use some improvements, but I'm pretty sure you've seen my computer monitor tower, which actually is on version like 1.2 now, actually. because originally it was just the bottom half was milk crates, and then the top half is kind of like a box, and then one monitor can hang down from the top upside down, and one monitor can sit underneath. So you can have two monitors, but they're stacked vertically, which saves space, and also I find to be better for multitasking because it's easier for me to look up and down between the monitors than left and right. But I replaced the milk crates. It's just straight wood all the way down, and now also the tower has a built-in power bar. So it has all the electrical outlets it needs to power all the devices that are attached to it.
Thankfully, when you say crates in a fantasy setting, you immediately think wooden and extremely flammable. So, your beautiful invention, how flammable is it?
Well, I mean, it's made of fence boards. So, I mean, wooden fences are not excessively flammable, but people do commonly burn wood as fuel, so...
So I think you just went up a point on the Karl chaos factor here, but...
Well, okay. My boss bought a house behind his store so that he could use the land as a parking lot, but it was cheaper just to tear down the fence and just use the backyard as a parking lot, and then we had all these fence boards. So it was like free lumber. Why wouldn't you just take free lumber?
See, the free lumber makes perfect sense. No one's going to begrudge you for the brilliant concept of, hey, no one is using this lumber, I'm going to take and use this lumber. It's when computer components start getting involved that people are like, okay, I need you to paint me a little bit of a picture here. Because once upon a time, when I was first learning Photoshop, I was doing a thing where I was designing custom lightsabers for my friends in Photoshop. Because I was playing around with vector graphics and things at the time. And I was very proud of my ability. This was like grade 7. And one of friends like, oh, I want a wood-paneled lightsaber. And I immediately thought to myself, sure, that would look cool, but wouldn't that just combust instantly? Because wood is not a good lightsaber material?
That would just be like a wooden sword.
No, it's funny because it's like the beautiful lightsaber handle, nice like ebony wood encrusted, it actually look really nice. And then you click the go button and your handle would just burst into flames.
It would look really nice.
And in fact, it did end up looking very nice. I was proud of that one in particular. I had to do some very specific image masking to try and make it look like it had a nice wooden finish on this lightsaber. It ended up being a green blade. In his brain, it made perfect sense.
That does make perfect sense. I do have to say, I mean, it looks better now that the bottom half isn't milk crates, but my computer monitor tower is, it doesn't look nice. It's very functional, but not very nice looking.
Yeah. Meanwhile, my brother assembled my current PC, and it has a chonky dragon figurine inside it that I got for Christmas once upon a time. And, like, my setup is nice, but admittedly the only part of my setup I actually assembled was putting my desk together. And, like, don't get me wrong, going to IKEA and building furniture is a delightful weekend, because I was born in my 30s and I just enjoy that kind of activity. But I definitely lack the ability to reliably put boards together to make something out of them. It is not a skill I was gifted with, thanks to my medically diagnosed stupid fingers.
Well, I mean, a part of doing any project is just getting started, because the motivation and inspiration will often come after you actually physically start doing things. I mean, you do have a medical disability, I suppose, with the dysgraphia, but projects in general, it's like, you know, I make up a lot of excuses for myself, but why I haven't done this, why I haven't done that. Like the sandblaster, I have this idea where I want to make my old power tools that have ancient looking batteries that are probably not going to last very long into power, plug-in power tools. And I kind of use that as an excuse to not move forward with my other projects, but it's like, well, currently the batteries do still work, so I've just kind of been putting it off. But if I just get started and just do it, then the inspiration and the motivation will follow.
I mean, I definitely find that. See, unlike a lot of writers, I've never had writer's block in my life, but I have trouble committing to a project unless I'm completely certain I know I'll have a certain reader base. Like for my first novel, I had a lot of acquaintances reading along as I went, and the knowledge that they'd read a chapter, enjoy it enough to finish it, send it back, gave me the motivation to string hundreds of thousands of words together. Where my current project, I'm trying to wean myself off the instant gratification of people being like, oh, that's awesome, and try and write this entire book, and once I have a completed manuscript, start showing it to people. Is a little trickier without getting that instant gratification from other people.
Well, yeah, that is true. Like, that's definitely a symptom of the modern era. Is that the search for instant gratification makes it much harder to commit to a single project.
Like an example of a side project I've been working on recently is I recently learned that it's not that hard to change the texture files on Nintendo, GameCube, and Wii games. And for the aforementioned Dokapon Kingdom, one of the characters suffered from female-designed armor. Where they didn't actually wear any armor that protect them from damage. So I successfully replaced the texture file for the female armor with the male armor texture file, and it actually gave the female character a completely functional outfit. And that project, I got some instant gratification, because then I'm like to my friend, you should come play this game. Look, I took the impractical female outfit and made it practical. Where that project, I can't be bothered to completely retexture every character model in a video game I may never play, because, quite frankly, my vanity requires me to have someone witness that I achieved this to give me the motivation to keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's... we had an episode where we talked about what kind of games you like, and I mentioned that I pretty much only buy video games that have local multiplayer. And it's kind of a similar situation where it's like, if you play an RPG and you get like super crunk and you get it to 100%, I mean, I guess you do get some personal instant gratification from completing a difficult task, but then it's like, well, what do I do with that? I don't feel proud enough of 100%ing a solo video game to show it to my friends. Be like, hey, check out, I got 100% on this game.
Well, that's kind of an interesting...
it's that's part of the reason I like local multiplayer games, is because I get the instant gratification from other people because we're playing together.
You see, for me, it's two directives, because, as I mentioned earlier, I don't really get writer's block, partly because I consume a truly absurd amount of media content, and then I often think, oh, I liked ideas from this and ideas from that, so I just have a massive catalog of ideas I pick from things I enjoy. So when I'm playing a one-player game like Fire Emblem Three Houses, for example, I'm not going to write a book that's based on Fire Emblem Three Houses. But I will hear a cool idea, a fun concept, an interesting set of characteristics, what makes this main character likable, what makes this character dislikable, what character would ship with this character, and that just kind of gets added to my catalog of ideas. So a lot of video games I'm playing are effectively interactive books, partly because I enjoy the interactivity. Like, I played Fire Emblem specifically to have two characters who are best friends fight each other in opposing armies to see if I get a special line of dialogue.
Right.
So my one-player games are less about physical achievement and more about what I can absorb out of the narratives. However, 2D platformers I will sometimes play as stress relief, but usually if I'm playing a mindless game, I also have a show or some sort of media going at simultaneously.
Well, so I mean, I've mentioned a few of my projects. The Sandblaster, my computer desk tower, my attempt at making Dokapon into a board game. You've mentioned you have your book that you're writing for November. obviously you have your other books, the Waltz of Blades, that you actually did get to publication, which was pretty awesome. But do you have any other projects on the go there, Richard?
Well, I'm honestly trying to have less projects on the go for more focus on individual projects. With the
Mm-hmm.
semester wrapping up, I have 5 large assignments on the go, and I'm trying to write a novel. And between
Mm.
that and running 2 D&D groups a week, that's pretty much my life. Like, my project for this week is to go to the dentist to get used to my student benefits before they roll over for the semester. So, as much as I have a folder labeled projects of hundreds of thousands of started board games, started card games, I downloaded a free trial of an RPG Maker just to see how hard it would be to make Fire Emblem, because
Mm.
I do love fan games, and I briefly considered how hard would it be to make a turn-based strategy Ruby game and then just anonymously post it onto the internet for my amusement. I played around with some visual novel making software to make just straight up interactive novels, because I'm like, oh, I can do this, and then I would just have to pair with an artist as I stare into the void for my lack of artist. So, I do a lot of dabbling in random projects when starting them, but this month in particular, I'm trying to keep on task. Phew! My apologies, listeners. I just sneezed on a mic. But with that, I think it's time for us to transition into our questions of the week. So, this week's dragon question comes in, and I guess I'll ask you this. What came first, the dragon or the egg?
Well, I mean, I'm fairly certain that the egg came first in this particular case. Not necessarily because the dragon laid the egg, but because evolutionarily something had to evolve into a dragon, but until it reached a specific point, there was some sort of egg-laying creature that then evolved into a dragon. It's basically, so I'm pretty sure that the egg came first because dragons are like the peak of evolution.
So I staunchly disagree, which is a surprising statement. You didn't see that's coming, but a lot of dragons are considered divine or mythical type creatures. Like in the new D&D book, the Tome of Dragons that came out recently, they talk about how dragons are pretty much born fully actualized and can actually become bigger by absorbing their echoes in alternate realities. So if we think of dragons as a natural being, a combination of energy much like a star or a deity, and view them in a mythological sense, then dragons, the original progenitor dragons, start as individual beings, and then dragon eggs come from them segregating pieces of that being into separate beings, if that makes sense. So we'd have our one apex dragon, our super Shenron, our Bahamut, our Tiamat, our Io, and then every dragon egg comes from that original deity class dragon, separating their power and spreading it over time. So if we're going pure mythological magic dragons, then I think the dragon came first.
That is a valid counterpoint.
But if we're going with dragons or dinosaurs, then yes, eggs, evolution, creature. So, next comes our random question of the week. What is your favorite Kirby animal companion?
So, I mean, I guess this depends on how you define animal companion, because, I mean, is the wheelie enemy a animal? I mean, it certainly seems to be some sort of sentient creature, but if I were going to choose a favorite Kirby animal companion, like Kirby riding around on the wheelie is just so much fun. When Kirby gets to shoot the stars and Wheelie gets to go and jump and stuff, and like that definitely was a super cool mechanic from one of the best Kirby games ever made, Kirby a Superstar.
So, if we go into the definition of a Kirby animal companion from my friend Wikipedia here, in Dreamland 2, they added Rick the hamster, Kryn the fish, and Ku the owl. Those were the starting animal companions. That is like the term or originator. So though if we picked from just one of those three, I'm going to pick the hamster, which Cassie has told me is incorrect because the correct answer is the owl. But if we...
I'm pretty sure the correct answer to those three is the fish, because the fish has the awesome light bulb power and the plunger power. Those are just like awesome.
I mean, my name's Richard and there's a hamster named Rick, and Hamtaro was key in my childhood. I'm gonna pick the hamster. I don't know if it's a strategic choice so much as just it's a hamster, and if you have the stone power, the hamster can turn into a giant boulder that the hamster runs on. Like, there's just some good things happening there. But if we stress Animal Companion to just companion, I'm choosing Kirby's magical mech suit from Kirby Robo Bobo. Cause
I see. I don't know if that counts as a companion, because is it actually sentient? I don't think so.
it has a face. And in the Kirby world, that's pretty much all you need to be sentient.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
And I'm pretty sure it just comes to your aid at the end heroically. So, I'm just saying it's about as we really do need to start giving turning tests to some of these Kirby creatures to see what constitutes aware and what isn't. Because the wheel could be sentient, but we're not certain. The mech suit could be sentient.
Definitely sentient. The wheel will attack you.
So will Amazon factories.
Well, I mean, they're not gonna like actively attack you.
If you design them to, they will. How do you know the wheel's just not a highly intelligent AI? Or a lowly intelligent, because it literally only moves left and right and is instructed to run you over. I mean, is that really different than a Tesla self-parking function?
Well, I mean, we are approaching true AI, I guess.
Amusingly, in one of the lectures I attended earlier this week, it was on the concept of AI writing books, and we went through some AI-written Harry Potter stuff. But that'll be a topic for a future episode. So, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in this week. Feel free to submit your random questions or dragon questions for your chance to win a copy of the Waltz of Blades Deluxe. And feel free to follow us on Patreon if you... Thanks to our Patreons for allowing our podcast to be streamed to all sorts of services, such as Spotify, Apple Music, Google Tunes, and all that fun stuff.
And remember, take care of your faces, because that might be all it takes for you to lose your sentience.
Perfect ending line. I'm just gonna cold end now. Bye.
Bye.